Okay, everyone, it is time to begin. I'm glad to have you here. My name is Bill Gibbs. I'll be the host for the session today. We have had a great session today presented by Steve Luczynski, Building Relationships to Mitigate Cyber Risk. And I'll do a little introduction for Steve in just a little bit. Let me talk about the agenda. And by the way, before we begin, let you know that the session is being recorded. We'll be sending a copy of the slides and a link to the recording to all participants and all registrants today. Here's the agenda we'll be following. First, just a little bit about capital. I always laugh when I include this because I know that many of you are actually students, faculty, or staff, or former students. But in case someone is out there and does not know a lot about capital, I want to at least mention a little bit about it. Then we'll do some housekeeping with session pointers. I'll introduce a presenter. The bulk of our time together, of course, is with our presentation with Steve Luczynski, and I'll introduce him. And then following the presentation, we'll have ample time for questions and answers. I'll talk about upcoming webinars. And I'm really excited about this series of 3 webinars that we're doing beginning this month, all related to various aspects of cyber. So if you love cyber, as many of you do, you'll really enjoy learning about these upcoming webinars. And then finally, how to get a link to the recording, to the slides, and how to get a certificate of participation. I'll mention all of that to you. Now, just a little bit about Capital Technology University. As I just mentioned, many of you are extremely familiar, in fact could probably school me on Capital, but let me just give a little bit of introduction. We're a nonprofit, private, accredited university, physically based in Laurel, Maryland. But we have a global reach, a global student body, a global faculty, literally reaching around the globe. And I haven't checked with this group here today to see where you're all from, but I know from talking to some of you in the past that you are literally all over the place. We were established in 1927, so this decade will celebrate our 100th anniversary, always related to STEM and technology. We're accredited by the Commission on Higher Education of the Middle States Associations. In the United States, regional accreditation is what we have, and regional accreditation is the highest form of accreditation available to any college or university in the country. We're also authorized by the state of Maryland, where we're physically located, to confer degrees all the way from the 2-year associate's degree right up to our doctoral degrees. And I see the slide should be changed because we now offer not only a Doctor of Science and a PhD, but we also offer a degree in a DBA. All right. Here's some session pointers. We'll answer questions at the conclusion of the presentation, but you can actually enter them anytime. So as the presenter is going through the presentation, feel free to type in your questions in the text chat. We're not activating microphones for any participant today, so that is the way that you'll communicate to us. We'll get the questions. We'll take just as many of them as we possibly can at the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, we're not activating microphones or webcams for the webinar today. We will be sending a link to the recording, a link to the slides, and also the information on how to get a participation certificate for today's webinar. Let me talk a little bit about our presenter today, and I want to get out my notes so I can do it right and read it to you. Steve Luczynski is a retired colonel in the U.S. Air Force and holds the CISSP certification. He's a senior manager of OT security for Accenture Federal Services and was the COVID task force lead for the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of the federal government. He spent 25 years in the U.S. Air Force, both as a fighter pilot and then later as Deputy Director of Cyber Plans and Operations in the Office of the Secretary of the Defense in the Pentagon. He is chairman of the board of Aerospace Village, and he'll talk extensively about that. He holds 3 Masters of Science degrees, one from the National Defense University, one from the Naval War College, and one from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And he earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Aerospace Engineering from Georgia Tech. It is with great pleasure that I introduce Steve Luczynski to the presentation, and I'll give it to him.
Thanks, Bill. Good morning, or actually morning to some folks and afternoon now. So Bill, I want to make sure I have the screen control. It looks a little bit different than what we did this morning. There we go. All right. So I think I am in charge of the slides now. Awesome. And I just want to make sure my video is going also, Bill. I can't tell if it is. I will go with or without it, however you prefer.
You have it, and then now you'll have to take control back that I fiddled with the mouse.
I got you. All right. So as long as I'm showing and everybody can hear me just fine, I'll get started. So plenty of time. I won't talk the entire time. I want to make sure that any questions and things that you all are putting in the chat room, comments on things that we can address those. So there'll definitely be time at the end for that. That's no problem at all. So, but first off, again, thank you everyone that's joining, folks that are going to watch this later on once it's recorded, for taking the time to participate and be a part of this. I want to say thanks also, Bill, taking care of me as always, getting set up and getting to work with you again, but also CapTech for putting on these talks. They've been a great partner, and I know them from both the work that I do with the nonprofit, the Aerospace Village, which I'll talk about a little bit more as I go through, but also when I was the Chief Information Security Officer, I used to work up in Greenbelt right nearby your campus. And one of my security analysts came from CapTech. I hired him when he was still a senior there. And I just appreciate the great work that you all are doing and putting on series like this, getting to be a part of all of these series, kicking off this discussion on cybersecurity. Thank you for that. And thank you for letting me be a part of that. I really appreciate that. So as Bill said, you can see the title of my talk, Building Relationships to Mitigate Cyber Risk. I think this is an area that cyber risk is, I know, getting more and more attention. People are trying to figure out how to address it. And it's typically on the technology side of things. We also talk about on the workforce side of things and how do you build that workforce? And that's where my focus is going to be a little bit more on the people part of that, and specifically on the relationships. And how we are, the work that's going on, the changing attitudes that are helping build those relationships, which builds trust, because ultimately we're all working to maintain the public's trust in aviation and space systems. And we want to make sure they stay safe and secure to maintain that trust. And that's what I'm going to dig in with you today. And like I said, I'm looking forward to your questions. I'm going to wait till the end to address them, but please feel free to put them in the chat room as we go forward and keep things going from there. So with that, the first slide I'm going to show you is the first picture I'm going to show you on my slide here. Once it gets moving forward, there we go. We talk about the ecosystem for aviation. And this is a very busy slide. It's hard to read. That's on purpose. This is very much focused on the aviation ecosystem. It's got some space elements because, of course, we depend on satellites and communication systems based in space for navigation, for communication. But the slide's showing you all the elements just as simply without going crazy, overcrowding the airports, the air traffic management, the aircraft themselves, the suppliers who provide all the pieces and parts that go into that. And this is just on the aviation side. This slide would be that much worse if I put in the same part of that for all of the space systems. But realize when we're talking about this, I am talking about it from an aerospace sector. And the point of showing this is to try to convey the complexity of what we're dealing with as we're building more and more systems, and they are becoming networked. And you can see the internet's right in the middle of this entire ecosystem. We're connecting them more, and we already have complex networks. We're making them more complex. And the problem is we're connecting them faster than we're securing them. And that's the issue at hand. Everybody's trying to figure out, how do we make them more secure to maintain that safe, great reputation that the aviation sector has right now with the public? And how do we do that as effectively as possible? But there's so many things we don't know. So we have to look at it from a risk perspective, and where can we buy down that risk? How do we mitigate it? How do we address it? and a number of things that come to mind. And what typically happens is put more money towards the problem, buy more equipment, buy more secure equipment, get more people to come into the industry. But that's a hard part. It's a very hard part of that, because it's not just a matter of money. You still have to have people who are willing to join, who want to join, who are interested in that and have the skills. And there's all these different pockets of people working in different areas across government, across industry, and in the security researcher community. So how do we get those different communities to grow? And how do we get them to work together to be better by working together? And that's what I'm going to focus on as I go through things today. Bill already gave a great introduction, and I really appreciate that. I'll show a little bit more just to give you some better understanding of my background and where I'm coming from. Right now, I work at Accenture Federal Services. I'm a senior manager focusing on ICS and OT security issues. I am not here today on behalf of Accenture Federal. I'm here on my own time. Prior to that, I worked at CISA for a year. I led a task force where we focused on cybersecurity and physical security for those entities who were supporting the national pandemic response. And prior to that, I spent 3 years in industry in the private sector as a chief information security officer for a government contractor. And even before that, I was in the Air Force. So I had an entire career there, had a great time. And that's where really, that's what got me started, because that is where I was a fighter pilot. I thoroughly enjoyed that. On the left side, that's an F-15. That's me. So I get to show a cool picture of way back in the day. I started in that airplane, and then on the right side's an F-22. And that's where I really got into, flying side in that sense, but also because of my time in the Air Force. My last 3 years I spent at the Pentagon, and I was in cybersecurity and cyber policy specifically. So getting to come here today and talk to you about what I'm seeing across government industry and the security researcher communities related to aviation cybersecurity, that's the best of both worlds. And that's what is very motivating to me, and getting to share those experiences with you. So again, I appreciate your time. And really where all of this started, I told you my background. I spent an entire career in the Air Force. But when I really started getting focused in aviation cybersecurity issues was back in 2014. I had just started in the Pentagon. And there had been a number of stories of security researchers, hackers, who were talking about the work that they were doing, finding vulnerabilities in systems, and even some claims about how they were affecting aircraft systems. And I had the opportunity to attend DEFCON 22 back in 2014, and hear talks about what can and can't be done, what was realistic and what wasn't. So it was very interesting to see that side of things starting to get talked about more in the hacker community. And because of where I was at the Pentagon, I got to see what was going on the government side. So where I worked, I am a uniformed Air Force airman at the time, but I was working with, as a part of the Office of the Secretary of Defense Cyber Policy. So the civilian side of the Pentagon that oversees all of the military branches. So having my operational uniform experience, but working with the civilians and learning all that goes into overseeing the military branches, the work of the interagency, Cyber Command, NSA, getting to have that experience. So it was great to see behind the scenes on the government side, specifically on the DoD side, what was going on in this area. And around that same time in 2017, industry had been looking at these problems. Industry had been addressing these problems, no doubt whatsoever. But it wasn't something that was talked about publicly very often. And so that's where, through the Atlantic Council, a think tank here in Washington, D.C., Thales sponsored a report, and it was written and authored by a friend of mine. His name is Pete Cooper. He's actually also retired British Royal Air Force. He's over in London, and he's actually working for the British government right now. But this report was one of the first times that anybody really pulled together interviews, perspectives, and getting thoughts of industry on aviation cybersecurity issues, something that had not really been talked about. And I had the opportunity to contribute that report. It was a great experience. And that is where I was starting to see what was happening on the government side, what was happening on the industry side. And around that same time, it was very fortunate in seeing these things come together that, again, smart folks who had a hand in each one of these communities and who were also involved on the hacker community side, where they were recognizing the importance of these efforts and starting to move forward on things. And so one of those is called I Am the Cavalry. And that is a group of folks, totally friends, co-workers, bringing in outsiders that just want to get together and work on these issues. And their thought is, hey, there's nobody else coming. You can't wait for the cavalry to save the day. So let's get together and start getting after these hard problems associated with different things in the transportation sector, biomedical, medical device hacking concerns there, election security, device security, all of those types of things. And so out of that effort, and in conjunction with the work going on at DEFCON, and I mentioned DEFCON before, and I just want to make sure for those who don't know, it's the largest hacker conference in the world. It happens every August out in Las Vegas. And I know I've been very fortunate that I've been able to attend a number of times, and CapTech always has a great presence there of inviting folks to come in and learn more about CapTech, and even all the way out in Las Vegas, because it's a great crowd and it attracts more students coming your way. So that's been good to see. What DEFCON offers is, just like any conference, you've got an array of presentations you can go to. You can spend all day bouncing around to different areas and hearing people talk about very deep technical topics, which is great. Or what they have are called villages, where you can go focus on a specific topic. You can sit down and you can listen to experts talking about car hacking, demonstrating it, showing you actual cars sitting there on the conference floor, Internet of Things, industrial control systems. And that's where the idea of focusing and getting people interested in a particular area, and in our case, what we started looking at was aviation cybersecurity. So the Aviation Village was born, and a number of folks that came together, and I was able to join that group. This was absolutely, when I say grassroots, a grassroots effort. In just 9 months, the idea to put together the village came out, and no money, nothing but time, energy, and motivation on part of the group of us that were doing all of this, put on the Aviation Village. And so we were able to bring together elements from the government, because we had the Air Force brought in an F-35 simulator. We had industry who teamed up with Defense Digital, and they were doing a bug bounty contest on a F-15 maintenance system. You may have seen articles about that. We had great partners. The picture in the upper right corner is pen test partners bringing in some aircraft equipment and talking about how the systems work and how they connect and come together. And then we had others like Rapid7. In that bottom right picture in the black shirt facing you is Patrick Kiley. He is one of the researchers at Rapid7, and he had found a vulnerability in a CAN bus system, which is widely used across aircraft. And on the left side of that picture, right next to him, is a cockpit mock-up that he built, demonstrating the equipment in use, powered on, and what that vulnerability could cause. So it was great to see all of those elements coming together, again, across government, industry, and the hacker community. And that was a great success of seeing everybody come together, the willingness to talk, and to start getting into these difficult topics. And so the good news was that was some initial efforts, and the village got to be a part of them. The follow-on things that happened, some of this was going on before we became the Aviation Village. Some of it came from spurring that activity. That picture that just popped up, that is a group of hackers and industry folks taking a tour, and government, taking a tour of the Boeing plant out in Seattle. Boeing started up a tech council, and again, as a way to bring folks together and start engaging and talking about these topics, talking about ways that they could work together to start addressing these very complex cybersecurity issues. We built on the village's success. We recognized space being an absolute integral part of what was going on. We changed the name to the Aerospace Village, and that's when we became a nonprofit. And we had the opportunity, if you can all think way back with me to the beginning of 2020, which seems like forever ago, one of the last conferences in person that I know I was a part of was RSA out in San Francisco in early March of 2020. And again, bring the mission, and what we were able to do was bring together where we had Boeing brought in an electronic flight bag and folks to talk about it. That's a picture of Ken Monroe, the CEO for Pentest Partners in the bottom right, and presenting about the work that they do in the aviation sector. And then having folks like Chris Krebs in that top picture in the middle, John Craig from Boeing, and then on the right side, and Pete Cooper, one of the founders of the Village, on the left side. Again, bringing that industry, government, hacker crowd together and having folks talk, even at an event like RSA, but getting the word out and being able to start engaging with that business side of the community. So that was really good. And those are the kinds of things that we're seeing where folks are starting to be more willing to interact, more willing to engage and get to know each other. And again, that's where we're starting to see those relationships growing from there. As we've continued, that work has kept going. Unfortunately, you know how it's been as far as conferences and not being able to travel. But the good news is that it allowed us a lot of connections and being able to engage folks, since we were all virtual. So we had a little bit more reach in that sense from the Village perspective. At the end, as 2020 went on, DEFCON also went virtual. But the great part about that was we had a very wide audience. We already have, with the Village folks, volunteers from all over the world that are participating in the Village, but at DEFCON, we had folks from all around being able to join in. So we had a wide variety of speakers from the space side of things, aviation side of things. What's pictured there, that's Pam Melroy. At the time, she had not started working for NASA, but she's now the deputy administrator. And the talk that she gave with us as part of DEFCON was her experience as an astronaut, getting internet on the International Space Station, providing cybersecurity for the space station and the space shuttle. And so hearing her perspective on that as somebody who's actually been there and done that, it was a great, her videos are up on YouTube, and you're welcome to go take a look at those through our site, which I'll show at the end. So a lot of good material there that you can still catch up on that we have posted. The other part that I mentioned before, the change in the name and acknowledging the importance of space and becoming the Aerospace Village. The idea for the Hackasat competition came out of that first DEFCON that I told you about in 2019. And so that grew between the Air Force and the Space Force, where they want to provide opportunities to allow folks who are interested in learning more, getting access to and hands-on this very difficult to access, very expensive equipment. And so they've been doing that through their the Hackasat competition, which is a capture the flag. They have questions and things, that the puzzles that people had to solve, astrophysics, astrodynamics, satellite orbits, space operations, cybersecurity, all of those things the contestants had to solve. And it was a $50,000 grand prize. So this was a great competition, attracted a lot of attention, great participation. And that was the first year of it in 2020. Hackasat has continued. They did it again this past year at DEFCON at the end of 2021. We're working on what we're going to do to host them at DEFCON coming up here this year, and plans for what's going on in 2023. So it's an ongoing event, and it's continuing to grow. Outside of just the Village work that I was primarily talking about, there are other efforts. Again, these things are continuing to grow, and the recognition of let's get out there and make connections and let's build these relationships through things like the Aviation Cybersecurity Initiative, which is run out of, it's a partnership between FAA, between DOD, namely on the Air Force side of things, and also CISA. And the work now is moving over to TSA, where they, as government entities, are making sure that they're connecting with industry, they're connecting with hackers, they're sharing. They have presented at, participated in events that we've been a part of, folks from the village, and including myself, have spoken at their events. So it's a good exchange of ideas. And again, it's having those people connect with one another and being able to share perspectives and help work on these complex problems together. Two other examples I'll throw out. The World Economic Forum published in 2021's Cyber Resilience, and continuing to focus on those aviation cybersecurity issues. For some of you that are up in the, right there at CapTech up in the Maryland area, you may recognize Hack the Airport. That was sponsored by a number of businesses in your area and women in cybersecurity. And again, getting attention, getting folks engaged and interested, and giving them a place to participate together in that Hack the Airport event, which was a very large following and a good success for them. So the things I've been talking about, this is the kind of momentum that we're seeing from what we've been doing in the aerospace village and what we start seeing others doing across government in industry. AIAA, they now have a focus on cybersecurity, and we've been able to participate and support their events. Others like Gray Hat and Blacks in Cyber, two other conferences that have been virtual, inviting us in, letting us talk to their folks, show the work that's going on, show where people can participate and learn more. We had the opportunity in 2021, of course, things were still virtual, to participate in RSA. And then again, DEFCON 29 at the end of last year. It was both hybrid and it was virtual and in person. So again, it was a good combination of being able to reach out to a wide audience, but we also had folks there in person, and it allowed participants to come in. So we had some great hands-on. Defense Digital, who's also a part of Hackasat, and the Hackasat competition, they brought in flat sats, and they had folks talking about, this is the equipment, this is what it looks like, here's how it works, so that folks could learn more about that and get some hands-on, as well as Boeing and Collins talking about airing 429 systems and what was going on there. So a number of things, again, where people cannot normally get access to the equipment, but this was an event that allowed them to do that. Plus, we just had some fun things. There was an entire area littered with paper airplanes. A contest was to build it and see who could throw it the most accuracy and the furthest. We also had other simple things of an Xbox using Microsoft Flight Simulator, and whoever had the best landing could win a prize there. So again, ways that we could find and pull people in and bring them into this sector and get them motivated and interested. And the good news is this is not going away. We've seen the work that's been done before. We're already planning for things coming up this year. The Civil Aviation Authority, very similar to the FAA over in the UK. We've been connected. We've been able to participate in their events. They are growing what they're doing with cybersecurity and how they're engaging with both industry and the hacker community. We were even able to participate and present at an Argentinian conference, Echo Party 21. That was a great event back in November of last year. Same thing with AIAA and continuing forward. And of course, RSA, for those of you who know about that, that moved from February to June, but the event is still on. Hopefully it'll be in person versus virtual. And we're getting ready for that, and have no doubt we are already planning what we're going to do in Las Vegas with DEFCON as we continue to grow. And we have more folks who want to come in and participate and join with what we're doing. And that's a great partnerships that we've been able to develop and go from there. And the thing across all of these events, I use these conferences and these different entities that we engage with to illustrate where there's interest, whether it's the government side of things, industry, or in the hacker community. Folks they have the interest, and they're starting to connect where they can come together, where they can help one another out. Somebody has the equipment, somebody else has the skills to learn that equipment and now start figuring out security issues. And that's what these events have allowed everybody to do, to get to know one another, start building those relationships. Because once you know somebody face to face, it's much easier to trust them, to get past some of these things that we're dealing with in these virtual environments and be willing to go engage with them. And that goes both ways. I've seen it where government and industry are reluctant to talk to hackers. They're different, they talk different, they act different. but they have the skills and they're smart at figuring things out and digging into things. Sometimes the hackers don't want to talk to the government and industry folks, business, stuffy. They don't want to deal with that side of things. But again, there's good value when they all start talking to each other and they're willing to engage and learn from one another. And that's where we've seen a lot of progress and success, especially when it comes to the folks that are motivated to learn more, giving them access, giving them opportunities to the equipment, to training, being able to learn more about it. That is inspiring folks to come in and learn these things and be willing to engage and, again, grow that next set of cybersecurity leaders that we know we need to continue building out the smart folks and doing all of that. So with that, I'm going to pause here as I know we're going to get into questions here in just a moment. And I'll wrap up by saying my contact information is over there on the left side. I'm going to go back real quick, Bill. And that is, you're welcome to get in touch with me either on LinkedIn or my email or on my Twitter. And I'm happy to engage and talk about it in case I don't answer anything here today. Our website is down there at the bottom, aerospacevillage.org, as well as on the right side, you can see our Twitter and our LinkedIn. Please connect with us. Lots of links and things you can go into. You can see the videos and all that we've done for virtual conferences for both RSA and for DEFCON, as well as some of the other events that we've done, some podcasts that folks have put together. Drone security is one example from there. If you want to get involved, you want to learn more of what's going on and what we're doing, that's the place to go. Any of those accounts, it's me on the other side and the rest of the team will jump in and answer any questions that you have, or if you want to volunteer. We are looking for folks as far as partnering to come in and contribute. We've had some great work with CapTech. They've supported us with a number of things, badges that we've made and have that people can solder together, program and have ADS-B antennas so you can see what's flying overhead. And that was invented by the concept came out of one of your professors, Rick Hansen, a good friend of mine. And we turned that into a badge with some smart folks and things along those lines where we continue to have these partnerships. And we're happy to talk to folks who want to do that. Volunteers are what run the village. We're worldwide. We've got one young lady based over in Japan. We've got a handful of folks in the UK, and then we're all over the US, and we're looking to expand further. So we're happy to have you come in as much as you want to join in and be a volunteer. Glad to talk to you about what's going on there. And again, if you just want to learn more, that's where we can also answer your questions. So please feel free to reach out and ask us any questions that you have. And then as far as for today, I'm happy to take your questions, and I know Bill's going to help me out with the chat room. So,
all right,
I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Steve. I've just found this fascinating. This is a personal note, but in 2020, I was able to help with the Aerospace Village at DEFCON, and I had the opportunity to hear Pam Melroy speak. I mean, virtually, of course, and that was a fabulous, fabulous presentation. There were many wonderful presentations. That's just one of many, but that one has always stuck out in my mind and well worth exploring all of those presentations and everything else that's on that site. Okay, we do have questions, and let me get into them. The first one comes from Jonathan Peterson. He says, I'm a PhD candidate at Capital. Congratulations on that, by the way, Jonathan. My interest is in data analytics and machine learning. However, I have a background in social science and motivation psychology. I'm wondering if there's an intersection between data analytics and psychology and how that it can be used to help mitigate risk in the aviation sector.
You clearly are a PhD candidate, Jonathan. So that's a great question. It is here's what I know, because I cannot answer your question directly. I have no doubt that if there isn't work going on there, it needs to be going on. And what I mean by that is when you're talking about mitigating risk in any sector, there's the psychology behind it. Why are people making the choices that they're making? Why does the CEO say, no, we have to do this, we have to save money? What motivates them to accept the risk of something versus the money of something? Because it's not just a money thing. So understanding that. What motivates, and I can tell you from a pilot perspective, why am I willing to take certain risks sometimes when I'm flying and other times I'm not willing to do that exact same thing? So that's risk management. And in all of that, when we now overlay cybersecurity, the pilot's not thinking about the cyber side of things. But as they get educated to understand there is a cyber element, there are things that in the cockpit I need to be aware. Maybe there's a problem with my instrument. Should I be worried about it? How can I tell? And does that change my decision making? So again, I can imagine there's elements from that behavioral side that you might be able to dig into. Similarly, when you go back over to that CEO, to that CISO, trying to make a decision on what they're going to do, what they're going to purchase, how they're going to do it, why they're willing to do things, that's where I can see that kind of work being a place that needs more effort in there. I really wish I could tell you, hey, go talk to this person at that place. I don't know of anything off the top of my head, and I've not run across it in any of the work I've been doing, but I'm happy if you want to send a note and, give me some ideas of where I could maybe point and connect you to folks that could help you do that. We do a lot of work. I mentioned AIAA, CapTech, other associations and other schools that may be doing something in the area that you're looking for. And I'm happy to try to make those connections and see if we can't help find somebody who is working on that, who has some ideas on that that you may want to talk to and get more information for your work.
Let me pop in there and say that we've just rolled out a brand new PhD program in cyber psychology and also a master's level of cyber psychology. Does not focus on aviation, obviously it is cyber in general, but there are elements of that. There may be people that are working in that field. That's all led by Dr. Mary Aiken, who she would know. So that would be a good contact for you, Jonathan, and for you as well, Steve. Let's look at the next question. And George Lawless asks a question that actually has been on my mind as well. It says, could you briefly explain the security risk profile on FCC versus FAA controversy on the 5G telecom delay? Why are we now so far behind 40 other countries? Is that media hype or real concern? Excellent question, George.
That is a good one. So I will be very careful because I am not the expert on 5G. What I have been paying attention to it and things I see in the news, especially from a pilot perspective, and what I've been and thinking on the cyber side. Because in my mind, same thing. I'm like, well, these countries are doing it. Why aren't we doing it? The way I understand it is that some of the other countries have a bigger bubble, an exclusion zone for 5G signals around an airport. And that means to me, the pilot in the cockpit, that when I am using my equipment that might have interference from 5G, once I'm inside that bubble, I don't have to worry about that equipment being wrong. I can trust the equipment being correct, which is what I have to do when I'm flying in bad weather. And not only are those zones bigger there, but I believe they're permanent. And so the way I connect the dots is in the US, the zones aren't as big. So that means if I'm flying in, there's more time that I might doubt my equipment before, okay, it's good to go. Well, by that time, I'm close to the ground, closer to where I need to make a decision to land or not. So that's not great. And I don't think the restrictions are permanent. Now, that's my level of understanding on that. So in my mind, that's where something hasn't quite been figured out. And I don't fully understand some of the things on the FAA side of why they decided to do it that way, how they're assessing. I know when we look at an instrument approach plate, the thing that as a pilot I use to determine where I can fly, where I can't fly, because I can't see anything in theory as I'm coming down through the clouds, and how they build those buffers so that I know I can come in, and if I don't make the runway, I keep going, I can make a turn and I have to go around. I don't have to worry about a tower or a mountain or a city, whatever it is, I have to avoid things like that to be safe. I don't know the thinking that went into why at this airport it's okay with 5G and there is no 5G, so do anything you want. Over here it's crowded and there's more of an issue. But I think those are some of the basics that are at stake. And that's what's causing this problem, unfortunately.
Thank you. That is a complex issue that is very active. J.K. Brown asks, does the FAA have an active cyber initiative?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes, definitely. Whether or not it's called, a specific initiative. So I'll break it up into two things. We had last year, I was incredibly fortunate. I interviewed the CISO for the FAA, Larry Grossman. Again, that's up on our YouTube site, and you can get to that through our website. And he gave his perspective on cybersecurity and what he deals with, because he's the CISO. So he's got to keep the agencies, let them exchange email and do all of those things specific to the government agency working and secure. But he also has to be involved with all of the FAA's work with airports, air traffic management, aircraft, and things of that nature. So I know that as far as an initiative goes, the FAA is involved. The FAA is looking at those things, at least in that perspective. And I don't remember if there was something particular that he may have mentioned in his interview, but that's another good place to get his thoughts on things. The other side of it that I will go back to, I mentioned it very briefly, the Aviation Cybersecurity Initiative. That's a joint effort across 3 agencies, and I can at least claim when I was working in the Pentagon, the early work to bring them together, to write the charter, to agree to cooperate, which is what you have to do in the government. I got to be a part of that. And that has since grown and blossomed into bigger than and better than anything that I ever saw or was a part of. So now you have a stakeholder engagement group within FAA. They're the representatives to that initiative. DoD has a representative, and so does CISA, and now it's moved over to TSA, and they have representatives. So they are working together to cooperate, again, across those 3 government agencies to work together on research and development. Who has the assets? Who has the smart folks who can do this? What are the policies and rules at play, and how do we make those better and more effective so it's more usable? Along with also how they reach out to industry and how they also reach out to hackers and the security research on these different issues. So I know in that sense that, yes, I would say that FAA has an initiative there, but those are a couple places that you could research further. And you can get involved with that ACI community. They have a community of interest. They hold quarterly meetings where anybody can join. They have different speakers come in. From the CAA over in London, other parts of industry. I know Boeing has had a speaker there before, and they have folks talking about these relevant topics. So that's another area if you're interested in.
Well, thank you. There are no more additional questions. Michael asked a question, and he'd sent it only to me, but I hope Michael won't mind if I throw this to a broader audience. The overall question was, are there internships available for people who, students who would like to work in the Aerospace Village, DEFCON, or even in the interplay of government and business that you have contacts with?
So specific to internships, I know between the government agencies and industry, they have their own system. Yes, I know that exists out there. For the village, we don't have internships per se, but we absolutely are happy to bring you in as a volunteer. And then you can figure out, based on what we're doing, where you may want to participate to work with somebody at a company, in a sector, on a project that's an area of interest. And what do I mean by that? We have folks, so you know my background, we have folks, some of the guys I'm thinking about over in the UK. They run a pen test company. They are security researchers. They have gone from being an independent researcher, they've gone to working at a British airline and now a US major airline. And so getting to work with him, He's done things on drone security. He knows about pen testing and aircraft and airline work and what he's doing at his particular companies. You would be able to volunteer and work with somebody like that to learn from them. Not a typical internship by any means, and not a paying one, I'm sorry to say, but that's the kind of folks we have. I mentioned before a young lady in Japan. She works for a space launch company on space operations. And so doesn't have a lot of time to volunteer, but can participate where she can. So that's somebody like that you would be able to talk to and interact with in the normal course of being a volunteer and helping out, again, as much or as little as you're able to do. So we have that wide variety of folks that come in and participate. And by doing that, we want you to get out of being a volunteer good things. So we're happy to find folks to connect you, to help mentor, to help you find other internships, especially if they're at companies you want to work for, and things like that. So we're happy to talk and help wherever we can.
Thank you, Steve. I think it was a great answer. This will be the final question, and we'll move to closure. But J.K.
Sure.
Brown asked this: can you point out an area of your greatest concern with respect to aerospace cybersecurity?
Wow, that is a good one. Thank you. Geez, to try to figure out. So I'll give you two. Right, the workforce one's a big concern. Getting folks interested, and getting them to be interested and have the aptitude and skills, the ability to get them those skills to focus on aviation systems, on space systems, because there's so much there that's very hard to do. There'll never be enough of that workforce. So how do we grow it as best as we can? You heard me talk about some ideas on that. And how do we keep encouraging that? The other side, from a non-people perspective, I'll take is the way that things are networked. We test them as this box is secure all by itself, and this box is secure, and this network is secure. And then we start connecting them. And we don't always test beyond that. And as we do, we're starting to see more and more difficulties. So we have to get better at doing that. We have to find ways to leverage the smart skills and the good technology to make sure that as we connect these things, they're secure by themselves, they're secure when they're connected together. And that's the hardest part. And tackling that problem when you have government policies, laws, and rules, you have industry and their concerns. How do you get all that to happen? That's my worry, because it is such a difficult problem. But at least folks are coming in. So the good news is they're trying. They recognize the problem. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes you don't always hear about publicly, because they recognize it. And that's good, because that's where we're going to make progress.
Thank you, Steve. I was just thinking that there was a day not so long ago that the biggest concern that people had was, can we make two systems communicate with each other?
Yeah.
That was the big problem.
Yeah.
And now the problem is not that, it's how do we keep it secure as they communicate?
Yeah.
But let's move on now. We are nearly done. This has been delightful. I see another question comes in. Let me, George, let me move ahead. And then if we have time, we'll come back to your question. But I want to make sure we're faithful to the time that we do have. I'm very excited about the upcoming webinars. There are two webinars that I particularly want to focus on. The one in February, February 17th, the one in March, March 17th. They look at different aspects of cybersecurity. Dr. David Gianna will look at cybersecurity challenges in the financial sector, and that impacts every single one of us. If you own a credit card or if you bank, you're going to be concerned about cybersecurity challenges. Then this one with Dr. Nikki Robinson, infrastructure, critical challenges and differences between the private and public sector. Steve, this is probably one you want to attend because you intersect in both of those areas. But how do we keep our cyber infrastructure, or our infrastructure as related to cyber, working and operational, particularly because it is a merger between public and private. And then moving away from cyber altogether, but on April 14th, Our Director of Career Development, Connie Harrington, will talk about skills identification and communication in writing a resume. I just want to mention that one particularly because many times people in the technical fields have a very difficult time translating their technical abilities in and putting them on a resume that resonates with employers, that they'd have a hard time matching those up. She'll show how to do that effectively. Now, moving on. This is the website to register for all of our webinars. Just go there and you can both watch those on demand and the ones coming up. This is, we're almost done with my part of the presentation. If you would like, we will be sending a copy of the slides and a link to the recording to everybody who is registered for the session. So you'll be able to watch it on demand if you'd like to and see the slides. If you would like to have a certificate of completion, the way that you get one is to respond to that email. In an email, I'll mention how to do that again. Just let us know that if you'd like to have one, we'll be happy to fire one off to you. With that, we are done with the webinar, but we have just about a minute or two to take this final question. I see that you've started to answer it already, so maybe.
Yeah, I tried.
Okay, that's
not much
good.
I can offer there. I'm sorry.
All right, good. Well, I'll let that answer stand then. And this is it's an interesting issue because you know, we have aircraft that have been flying for 30 years, and I own nothing now, not even clothes that are 30 years old, much less highly technical pieces of equipment. Keeping all this safe is something else. Now, with that, I think you've answered the question as well as anyone could. Let me go ahead and say we are concluded. You may log off at this time. I'd like to particularly thank our presenter today, who's done a marvelous job, and also all of you joining us, and those who are watching the recording, thank you in advance for taking the time to view this on demand. With that, we are officially done, and you may log off at any time. Thank you.
Everyone.